Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Small Business Storytellers. Today's going to be an exciting episode because we are diving into some stickier topics and talking about why there might be too many businesses, why we might not be paying enough for things, a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but conversations that I think are super helpful for us to have when we're talking about business. And so on today's episode, we have Connie Matisse, who is one of the owners at East Fork, which is a pottery manufacturing company in Asheville, North Carolina. Connie, how are you doing today?
I am. I'm feeling more grounded and generally happy and content than I have been in the past couple of years. So I'm kind of taking the wins when I can, and so at this moment I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, that's wonderful. I've been looking forward to this interview because as soon as I stumbled upon East Fork, which was through the B Corp community, as you guys are a B Corp, it was very evident that you do things differently and that you do things with intentionality, from how you create your products to how you communicate about your company to how you treat your people. And there's so many things that we could dive into with that. But first off, I would just love to kind of get some of your insight and thoughts into the way you are doing things. I know that's a big like statement to dive into, but it's so evident that you're doing things differently than, okay, here's corporate America and here's how to build a business. And, you go as fast as you can and sell as much as you can and charge, this is how you charge and this is how you treat people. Like, you guys are on a different path as far as business goes. So take me back to like the early days of East Fork and when things were getting started. What were some of the things that like solidified, like, we're going to build this thing differently?
Yeah. So the company had an interesting start that set us on a pretty different foot than startups get set on. My husband, Alex, who's our board chair and president now, was a potter. He had studied in a very traditional ceramic lineage with North Carolina potters, the 3 years of traditional apprenticeship, had dropped out of college and decided that he wanted to be a potter for life. When I met him, I was deep in an existential crisis at 24, and he was like, I know exactly what my purpose is. I'm going to be a potter. I'll be a potter till the day I die. And I was like, whoa, okay. We're in different places. But he's a really driven person. He had this vision for something that he wanted to create. And he just every day would wake up and I'd look at different drawings of the kilns that he was going to build and sketches of the pots that he was going to make. And he just did it one step at a time. And then, a couple years into just making pots alone in the woods, a friend of ours, John Vigland, was setting out to take a similar path. And then I was there still trying to figure out what I was doing in North Carolina. And the three of us coming together realized that we had something pretty unique on our hands, that the three of us got along really well. We had a shared vision of doing something that brought a lot of people and a lot of moving parts together. We kind of had these just glimmerings, these like inklings of a vision for what we could do together that translated pottery in the tradition that we made it in and kind of bridged it into a new reality that was a little bit more accessible, that brought more people into the fold, that wasn't so isolating. And we got really lucky. I think our advisory board often calls out that it's pretty unusual that three people have such distinct skill sets and kind of can meet over a shared vision. And we've done a really good job for the most part early on of like kind of staying in our own lanes and then coming together when we need to. And that's changed a lot. It's as the business has grown, we've had to really dive deeper into the how do we work together sort of conversations. But yeah, the three of us just came together and we're like, we have this commitment to making pottery that's really unique. It was right when pottery was starting to like get kind of hot in like Brooklyn and Los Angeles, and we saw all these like kind of artsy, cool shops having pottery pop-ups, and we'd look at the pottery and we'd be like, that's not very good. Like that's someone who's trying to use words like wabi-sabi to justify bad pottery, and they're selling it for all sorts of money. Like we have an interesting thing to say in this conversation. And so I came from a big city and from a restaurant background and an activism background. And so kind of naturally took the lead on figuring out how we communicate what we were doing to a broader audience of people who weren't familiar with craft pottery. And it kind of started rolling from there. Yeah.
Amazing to always see the difference, just the different places that every journey starts. And it is, it's so aware that you started with intentionality. I think with where your company's at now, it's not a place that you arrive by accident. And I think that when we do things intentionally, I think we're rewarded. And you guys have been rewarded. Now you're sitting at 115 people, still what the government would call a small business, but what most of America would call not a small business. And on your website, you have one interesting thing that kind of got me thinking about diving into how you treat your people and how you pay them. You mentioned that you are committed to providing solid middle-class manufacturing jobs to your Asheville community. Tell me more about why you think it's important to make that known and why that is something to focus on.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting conversation to be having at this moment in a town like Asheville. Especially after 2 years of pandemic, where Asheville had already kind of been put on all of the best places to visit list, best places to relocate. When over the past 2 years, the influx of people trying to flee bigger cities to find a more manageable place to live that was beautiful and artsy and funky. The city just got completely overwhelmed with people coming in, to the point where employers who were paying living wage jobs, paying what's a certified living wage, were finding that their workforce couldn't find a place to live in Asheville. They couldn't afford to get their car fixed when it broke. The city has priced out people who were born here so effectively, and if you can't really run a tourist town, there's when the only jobs are in food and beverage and hotels, it just becomes like a Disneyland sort of place instead of a place that people actually want to live and have families and set roots in. And it's been really sad to see people having to leave Asheville because they after having been born and raised here, suddenly they just could not afford rent, or not even couldn't afford it, but couldn't even an apartment's just were nowhere to be found. And I think it's as we knew that if we were going to be an employer, if we were going to grow a business, then there needed to be a real valid reason to support that desire to grow. So early on, we knew that if we were going to grow a business, it was to be able to build long-term generational wealth for the community that we were working within. And Asheville's provided us a ample, interesting playground to have that conversation in. Last year we raised our minimum wage to $20 an hour, and that felt like a huge accomplishment. But even at $20 an hour, it's really hard to find an apartment. And it's the living wage calculators that people use really are meant for a one person, no kids, no health issues, no familial responsibilities. Their income is just paying for their own livelihood, and that's not most people's realities. And so it felt like if we were going to be making a thing and selling a luxury item to people who do have disposable income, we needed to address the fact that most people who were working at our company wouldn't be able to purchase the objects that they were making in the store that we were selling them in. And it turns out that the unit economics for making something in this country are not the odds are not in our favor with the way our economic system is set up. The government doesn't make it super easy for businesses our size to make the math work.
Yeah. And I mean, from a business perspective, we're in different industries, obviously, service and podcast agency and pottery manufacturing, but I'm in Fort Collins, and Fort Collins and Asheville are often called like sister cities, and we share positions on that list. And we've seen really similar things happen in our town over the last few years. And friends and family that I know that like in the last couple of months, they've all like moved out of Fort Collins, not because they want to, but because they kind of have to, and they realize, it's more important for us to be in a place where we can start building that like financial future for ourselves and for our family. And so I think it is an interesting place to be in. What are some of the things that you think need to change? Just like business wise, you talk about, government and kind of how the business works in our country and unit economics. Like, are there a couple like big things that you think might kind of be broken with how this all works that would, if changed, maybe make a difference in some of these communities and in some of, not even just communities, but some of like the people that like some of their lives?
Yeah, Seth, you're asking me this question at a very interesting moment where while I did say early on that I was feeling like personally quite content and generally happy, I've also just been like feeling not just disillusioned, but like firmly convicted that the energy that we have been putting, like us as a business, and the energy that I see so many people putting into trying to take these systems and kind of bricolage them and like make all these connections and get this government fund to support this nonprofit pocket of money to bring this donor together, like all of these like really complicated webs that are basically just trying to make the systems that we have available to us service our needs. Like I think that we're wasting our time and energy. We just visited this really beautiful concepts in a town called Morganton. It's called Industrial Commons. They're doing really incredible work trying to build generational wealth in the Morganton community and keep people there. And the network of interconnection that they've built with like all of these different government entities, private entities, nonprofit entities, is so admirable and also so complicated that when I walked away, I was like, whoa, like how do you continue to kind of like build upon this house of cards? Like what happens if one part of this ecosystem gets demolished, and they're doing so much work to kind of safeguard against that. But it's so much work, I see people just like working so hard to make these things work, where it's just like that. Again, like even there's only so much we can continue to raise our prices, and $22 an hour still is not going to be able to close this gap of access that exists in our country. And I sometimes I'm just like, all it would take is the people who have like really a lot of money to just give it away, not like for us to have these complicated ways of investing money that puts things into these different, just give it away. So, what do I do with that? Like, I think right now where I would like to see anyone who has power, which is all, like most of us have some type of power over someone else, like for the work to kind of take the systems work to kind of take a pause, and for everybody to take a collective step back and drill deeper down into the self work of becoming more self-aware, understanding how you are complicit in systems, understanding like which choices you're making on a daily basis that have negative impact that you're not yet able to or ready to stop making. Like I have so many things that I do on a daily basis that I know are harm causing in various degrees, and really sitting with that, making that list of here are all the things that I have yet to say, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Right. I don't know. I think that's where everybody needs to be, and especially business owners, before you kind of jump into action and try to start fixing things with, by kind of putting.
Yeah, it's a weird balance of recognizing that there's these big systemic problems that, in one sense, like other decision makers and other people need to make a lot of changes that will affect the whole system, that will, make things more equitable. But at the same time, realizing that, Gandhi was pretty smart when he said, be the change you want to see in the world, and that it does start with us. So it's this weird, and I think you said it well with self-awareness of we have to be aware of the system, but we also have to be aware that the system changes when we begin to do things differently. And I think even from, you hinted at this of the consumer mindset of just how we're maybe participating or contributing to waste or different things and how we engage with products changing. You are a premium product, and pottery is not made to be, used a couple times and then throw it away. Help me to understand and help our audience to understand why our perspective of how we use products probably needs to shift towards maybe even spending more on some products, maybe being more aware of, are we buying products that are going to last, and that where we know where they're made from. I know, again, that's a big topic that we could talk about probably for a couple hours, but help our audience to understand what should we be thinking about when we're bringing products into our home and when we're exchanging money that we've gone and worked for products that we're going to use.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of going back to what I just said about needing to develop that self-awareness to see where you as an individual might still be stuck. This is a big one for me. I was just on a rant about, it's I can't believe that I'm the CEO of a manufacturing company. I don't think anyone should make a single plate ever again. There's enough plates in the world. And, why do people need to keep making socks? And then literally 2 days later, this big snowstorm was going to come. I was looking at my socks and I was ugh, and I was at the co-op grocery store and I bought 4 new pairs of socks. And Alex was you literally were just on a rant about how people should stop buying. It's really hard. We're so deeply trained to convenience, to get it now, to they're just never not being advertised to in every single direction. I participate in that. I as a business leader, I have a fiduciary responsibility to sell $18 million of pottery this year, in order to keep paying everybody the $8 million payroll that I have to pay everybody. It's more than that, actually. That's $12 million payroll next year. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to this question because I'm currently wrestling with yes, I need to continue to advertise the pots that we're making. I also want to tell people that they need to slow down, stop buying stuff. And I have a lot of conviction in the product that we make and the way that we make it. I feel what we're doing and the kind of way that we're modeling running a business is valid and important. And I take that kind of leadership responsibility very seriously. And also I kind of wrestle with that, that feeling of complicity, every day. So then you think, okay, well, what can I do? But I do believe I am also a very tactile person. I believe in, that beautiful, thoughtful objects made with intention, do have, create value and kind of enrich the kind of daily tapestry of your domestic life. And as someone who's now gotten very into being home all the time, I get so much pleasure and joy from decorating my home and moving things around and kind of having these objects that I have all these memories associated with. And I mean, it's as basic as that. It's are we bringing things into our home, that are going to contribute, that serve a function, that are going to make our home lives feel, more comfortable, safer, that really speak to our own aesthetic our own aesthetic kind of pleasure that might be always developing or might be always, or you might have a very clear vision of what that looks like. And I think all of your ability to make those choices, with intention does come from, doing some self-inventory and really understanding what is valuable to you, how do you relate to objects around you? So that when you're making a decision to buy something new, you're doing it from a place of having considered how it's going to, I don't know, like really inviting it into your home. You know, you wouldn't just invite any person that you meet to come and hang out with you in your kitchen. And I take that same approach to the objects that I choose to bring into my life. And especially for, you know, so many folks who are, I just kind of like if anyone who considers themselves like a progressive person, who kind of rages against the, I don't know, the callousness of the Republican Party and how it doesn't care about people. Like, if we're going to continue to purchase objects that are being made by people who are hardly getting paid enough to put food on their tables, like that is hypocrisy. It just is.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I make those choices and I have to sit with the hypocritical decision that I just made, you know. I think lessening, like becoming more aware of the impact your choices have on people, and lessening the frequency with which you make those choices is something we can all participate in.
Yeah. I love the intention that you're putting into your product, where you're thinking like, if somebody's going to bring this product in their home, you know, are they going to be able to know that, like, you know, the person on the other side that was involved with the making of this product, that they're, you know, being taken care of. You know, is this product not just being like rushed through as quickly as possible, but there's actually some intention going behind this. And I think any business owner listening, anybody that is, you know, if you're listening to the show, you're probably in some way trying to build something. And I think that we all need to have a little bit more of that with the services or products that we sell. Are we really thinking about, like, is this an actual piece of value? Not just, is this an item that I'm selling as much of as I can and getting as many margins so I can have as much money as I can, but like, are we actually giving an item of value or a service of value? And so I love that approach. I'd love to know, what are some of the things, like, inside the business, like take us to the manufacturing line. What are some things that you are doing that maybe go against, that maybe kind of go against this mentality of like, okay, let's just do as much as we can, as quick as we can, as cheap as we can, that are really helping there to be that level of like care in your product? I
mean, kind of everything we do in our making process is, goes against. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that if you wanted to like make a quick buck and then have something to retire on quickly, that you start a ceramics manufacturing company.
Yeah, like if a private equity firm came in and they were like joking that they were, you know, they were like hypothetically going to like come and look at your business, I'm sure there'd be a lot of things where they're like, okay, you should change that. You should change, like, we can squeeze margins here. But what are those things that you're like, no, we're going to keep doing things this way, because we know it matters, and we know like it matters to the product we're delivering?
Yeah, I mean, we've been approached by a bunch of private equity, like some of like the big players in the D2C space, who want to, who are very intrigued by our brand storytelling and the kind of the brand in general. And immediately they get in there, they're like, well, you don't need to be making this product here. You can make it in Mexico. You can make it in Portugal. You can make it in Portugal, where everybody else is making their pottery. Like, it's all of the other D2C ceramic companies are being, their product is being made by one factory in Portugal. And it's amazing what they do over there. But, and you know, it's for us, the teaching, keeping those manufacturing jobs here is first and foremost, like that's a big one. Like, just the fact that we're not thinking about, moving our production elsewhere. We're here doing the process top to bottom in Asheville. I mean, it's kind of everything that, like, the last 2 years, especially, we have done some really sobering, I just had really sobering conversations around the growth goals we'd put in front of ourselves. And at one point realized that, like, yes, we probably could hit our production and our revenue goals if we continued to kind of keep everybody on the treadmill at top speed. But about a year and a half ago, like, we personally, as the owners of the business, had reached a point where we were recognizing that if we didn't make a major change to the pace at which we approached our work, like, we would be all going down in a burning hellfire. Like, we were so burnt out. We were being so, we were just working from a very personally unresourced place, and like causing a lot of harm to each other, to ourselves, neglecting our family's needs, neglecting our interpersonal relationships, health, just working. And it was when we finally woke up to that and stopped and the kind of what people say about like everything being able to point back to the top. I used to be so resistant to hearing that from Alex, as it felt like an accountability shift of like, oh, like Connie, you doing that thing is affecting this thing over here that's way far away. And I wasn't ready to kind of acknowledge that I had that much power. And then when I did, I was like, oh shit, like, no, I'm so burnt out that I'm making really rushed decisions, that I'm having these expectations for other people to kind of work at the pace I'm working that are so unrealistic. People are really miserable. And we really started to feel the impact of that, and had to kind of ask ourselves those harder questions about like, why are we growing? What's the point of it? If everybody that is working with us is having a really bad time, no one is telling us that we need to do this except for ourselves. And so we've been trying to, you can't just like sit, we still have to pay people. So we couldn't just like throw a wrench in it and be like, we're done, we're pausing. We're going to stop growing. But we did see what it was like to just incorporate more rests into our personal schedules at work, like to put big time blocks off in the week where no meetings were allowed. People were allowed to do focused work, where kind of just normalizing taking more rest, and like how that translates to the production floor is, a small example is that like when you're working as fast as you can and you're not really paying attention to the product that you're making, you end up with a lot of with poor yields. You end up getting more seconds. You end up passing a pot that maybe got bonked by someone's hand in the very first step of the process, and you end up wasting everybody's time. Like the next 12 people who touch that pot all have to waste time on doing their part of the process for a pot that is going to end up as trash. And so you're creating waste, you're wasting people's energy, and you're being mindless about the work that you're doing. So even that type of pausing of like, okay, let's get these teams together and say, how can the person in QC say, hey, I'm noticing that I'm getting pots that have this funny little mark on them. And I think like, let's trace that back to what's happening over here. And let's take a collective pause and talk to each other about how we can all work together to improve our processes and move a little bit more slowly in order to be more intentional and effective with our movements. And so just like, I think that's just, you can say that about literally any job. Like if your head is down and you're thinking about like a goal and you're just like chugging away without ever pausing, taking a breath, resting, seeing taking a zoomed out look at what you've done. You're just in for a mess.
Right.
So that's one thing. The product that we make, like the clay body that we make is, and no one makes pots that look like ours because we use a material that, that's very finicky, that requires our materials team to kind of be on top of every little detail of particle size. And, we could very easily just like make a completely different product with much more uniform clay body and make it much more easily, much faster. But it would, it wouldn't be the product that we loved and that we designed.
Yeah. I think those conversations are so healthy to like step back and realize what is growth. Is it purely like revenue? You're in Asheville, I'm in Fort Collins, which means we both know breweries. There's a couple breweries that have, breweries in both cities. And I've seen like, there's one that has brewery in both cities that like they overextended themselves and then ended up getting bought out. And you could tell that it was like their goal was to continue growing as fast as possible. And that's not necessarily always wrong. I think you just need to know that. And I think like in Fort Collins, the frustration with that was, this image of like, we don't need to grow as fast as possible. We're like local, we're craft, we're all this stuff. And then you realize, okay, well, the goal actually is to just keep growing around the world as fast as possible. As opposed to like, there's some brewery owners here that I know that like, they they've designed their brewery to operate at like maximum capacity, to where like when they're operating at full capacity, they're going to be serving locally. They're not going to distribute because of its cost to the environment. And they want to be like an amazing local brewery where they know that they're like 8 to 10 people are being taken care of well. They enjoy their job. They're compensated well. Neither one is necessarily like wrong. I think it's just right to know like where you stand. And so, yeah, for you as the business owner, kind of as we bring this conversation to a close, like where, I guess, like, I'm just curious, like, where is it going for you as far as like value, as far as goals? Like when you're thinking about like, okay, cool, we have this, $18 million, 115 person business. Kind of the big question boiled down is just like, why, and like, where do you see this going, for you? And like, what does value in the future look like for you as a business owner?
Yeah, I mean, it's a super interesting question, and one that Alex and John and I as a founding team are starting to have together. And I think of all of the areas where like this is where we're like the most misaligned, and that I think that's wonderful. Like what we're all coming to realize is that the three of us don't have to have exactly the same vision or the same vision for the company, or we can have the same vision for the company, but like how we relate to the company does not have to be the same. Alex, right. He will go down with the ship. Like he wants, East Fork is the thing that he wants to put his entire kind of life force behind. And but he's also like, he's asking those sorts of questions about like, what is it about my own upbringing that is giving me this like unfettered desire to like do something as big as possible. And he's made a lot of kind of personal revelations over the last 6 months around that. John knows that he wants to get to a point where he can step away from the CFO role and be more play more of an advisory role, and continue to support the business and but kind of move away from his ownership a little bit, figure out how to distribute his ownership across other stakeholders of the company. I'm still really thinking about that for myself. Like I want East Fork I want to do my part now to set East Fork up for success. But I think that one of the worst mistakes a founding team could make is thinking that you are the one and only person who can do the thing that you want the business to do. That's, I guess I had a personal experience of ego death over the last year. And it was really humbling and really necessary. And I think it's contributed to me being a happier person. But, a lot of my attention right now is what can I do now to start passing on responsibility, really empowering people who are in my team to have more ownership over the processes that they have ownership over, and how can I start thinking about bringing someone along to maybe, do like a 6-month apprenticeship period with me, follow me around, and then eventually I can pass the baton to. So I think that you're dead in the water if you don't think that there's someone else who's eventually going to do the job better than you can, especially with, as folks get older, and so many people in business who get in this mindset that younger generations have nothing to offer, their business, don't have business acumen, I think is really limiting. So I don't know what my own relationship, I don't know. I'm still in that process of deciding. I have a lot of other interests that are not necessarily served by me being in this role. But I do.
But it sounds like you're exploring it.
Yeah, I'm making space to have the conversations, and I want to get East Fork to a point where more benefits expansion and some sort of profit sharing model. All of those things are kind of like established. Is what I want to make sure happens before I duck out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been great, and I think some of those questions that you're asking, again, I think there's no right answer. I think the important thing is that we're asking those questions. I know that over the last year or so, I've had a lot of challenges in my life that have probably been accelerated, or struggles in my life that have been accelerated because I have, for many years, it was kind of just like, oh yeah, like kind of the hustle and grind, like just build as fast as you can. You just got to build. And I think the struggle is when we just adopt someone else's view of like, here's what it means to build a business. Here's what it means to be successful, as opposed to like having those conversations. And I love that you can be transparent with like, yeah, we're figuring that out. But we know we want to treat our people well. I think that's got to be the goal, is to have space to be able to have those conversations. So I encourage all of our listeners, go check out East Fork, eastfork.com. The link will be in the show notes. Truly, truly beautiful stuff that you make. Do you have, this might be an impossible question, do you have a favorite product?
It's not that impossible. I've been really loving our black glaze. I'll give you the inside scoop is that it's retiring this next week, but we're actually bringing
Black
it back.
Mountain.
Yeah, Black Mountain.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. So I'm going all black in my kitchen these days, and the everyday bowl and the mug in black are my two current favorites.
Awesome. Well, again, I encourage our listeners, head over to eastfork.com, or if you're in Asheville. Do you guys have a storefront?
We do. We have a storefront in Atlanta in Westside Provisions District, and we have a storefront in downtown Asheville.
Amazing. So yeah, I'll definitely have to check one of those out next time I'm in the area. But Connie, this has been wonderful. This could easily continue, and I'm excited to follow the journey, follow the story of East Fork, because we need more businesses that are growing with intention, and that aren't just like staying put, saying we're going to be this small little thing, but that I think you have a responsibility. I do think you have a responsibility to grow. I don't think that growth means just revenue, but grow in benefits and how you care for humans and all of that. So I'm excited to follow where your journey goes. So Connie, thank you so much for joining us on the Small Business Storytellers. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, Seth. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.